Hi guys, welcome back to Bunny Brook Designs. So we're going to be working on the Bargain Bead Box Seafoam Sunrise. And in the last one of the last videos I recorded, I had talked about working on doing things a little bit differently this for the next few months, and trying to do some really unique pieces from the Bargain Bead Box, and seeing if I can do like shibori and wire wrapping. And so in the previous video, we did wire wrapped earrings with the two half drilled beads. And in this one, I am going to be doing some shibori. And so I did one off camera, so I'm going to bring this in and show you. So I did this piece right here. And as you can see, it's using some seed beads from my stash. I pulled some bicones in from my stash for some smaller stuff. And then used a lot of these little beads and one of the bigger beads to kind of give it, I feel like this is like either a leaf, I feel leafy, or seafoam. Like, you know, at first I was like, oh, it looks like a shell, like a piece of shell. So we're going to do the other one, the mirror image of this one. So what I did in order to get my design is I have this wood blank. And so all I did was on this one, I drew it this way. And then on here, I just flipped it and drew the shape, drew around the shape, so I had my pattern. Now this is just felt from Walmart that I have stiffened with glue. And when I was doing this one, apparently I had stiffened this really well and with using too much glue in spots, and I actually broke a needle. So when you're stiffening felt, like, you know, right here, I can't even bend that. You should be able to bend it a little bit. You want it stiff, but not so stiff that it's like here, hard as a rock. So that's, you know, about the same spot that this one did where I broke the beads. So we're going to keep this one here as our template. And I'm going to show you how to do this. So what you're going to need a needle. I am going to grab a smaller needle, and this is for sewing on the shibori ribbon. Now I've already cut the ribbon in the right length, and then I cut it in half because I don't need a whole really wide piece, because usually when you pull this apart it's double the width, so it would be out to about here. I didn't need all of that for these earrings. So what I'm going to do is I am going to get some thread. Now I'm using embroidery thread, polyester embroidery thread to sew this down. Doesn't really matter what you're using to sew this part down because it's not going to be going through beads. I will say when I was doing this one, this thread tended to get knotted up, so I'm going to show you how to bead it, or how to get it started, and then discuss how to sew it on. We're not necessarily going to sew everything on together, just because that takes quite a while, and you don't need to sit here watching me sew fabric to felt. So I'm just going to make a knot. I'm doubling up my thread just so that I have, you know, a nice sturdy amount. And all I'm going to do is just go in and start by anchoring my thread like that. And now you could anchor it, you could tie it, you could tie, instead of putting a knot in, you could just tie it through there. I always like to anchor my thread. Now, I know I want to curve this, like, so basically like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out up here, and I am going to cut off some of this. I'm going to start out up here. And again, you've got to make sure that you get the right coloring in the right spot. So the yellower part is up here and the more seafoam is down here at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out by coming up, and first, before I do that, I do want to mark, as you can see, my curves here. I do kind of want to mark, so my curve is going to start here and go to about here and start up here like that and go to about there. Again, I'm just eyeballing it. I am going to count beads. So I'm going to start out up here at this point. And so I'm going to come up through the felt in a spot. And I am just going to, and see, this is what I mean by it gets knotted up because all it takes is just a little bit. So one thing I am going to do, I do want to, I think I do want to put this here. So I'm just trying to make sure that I get my lines in roughly the same spot. So that starts there and it goes to there. All right, so it's there to there. And then this one, as I'm sandwiching, it starts. So all I'm doing is just eyeballing and goes to there. So it's here to here. And again, nobody's going to see this when we're done. It's going to get cut off. So if you can imagine a line running, that's why I'm putting it like that, a line running like that and running like that so that they're opposite each other. I could start at the very top, which I may do. Again, I'm trying to get this as perfect as possible, so I am going to start dead top. And oopsie. So I'm just going back through the felt. If I don't snag my fabric. And I'm going to start right up here at the top. And I'm just going to pick up, so I'm bringing in some seed beads. So what I'm using on this, these are 11-0 seed beads. These are dynamites. I get them at Fire Mountain Gems. And they're Ceylon Pastel Seafoam. So they're seafoam, so they match the beads. And I had this in my stash. So we're gonna start out. And I don't know if I want to start directly up top there. So I'm just going to sew back through the thread because I'm talking and not paying attention. All right, to get this on, we are going to, again, we're going to sew in the direction of the shape. So when I sewed this one on, I sewed it so that it was pointing, the fabric was pointing diagonally like this in order to get it to curve. So on this one, because the curve is this way, I'm going to be sewing it on here. Now I'm not going to be sewing it directly right up at the tippy top. I'm going to be coming down just a hair. So now that I've kind of marked it, I'm going to come through, and I'm not going right to the edge. I'm coming in just a little bit. So right, maybe a 1/16 of an inch, couple millimeters. And then just to make it quicker, as you can see, there's pleats. So I am just going to run through all of the pleats. That is if I can, if I don't. So I'm just going to run through all of the pleats like that, which is going to get me at least it attached to the fabric. And then now that I've gotten it attached, I'm going to go back down about 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch, just a few millimeters from the edge. And see, this is what I mean by this thread tends to tangle. It's meant for like machine embroidery, so it's very slippery. All right, so now that I've got it attached, I am just going to go back up through, and I'm just going to tack this down several times just to make sure it's tacked down really good. And it doesn't really matter, again, because this is going to be covered by beads. So that's probably good. 3 stitches, and it's just a basting stitch that you're doing. There we go. And then now you're going to pick a side. Doesn't really matter. I think I started with this side first on this, or did I? I started... No, I'm going to start with this side. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up through right close to the edge, and I want to snag the edge of the fabric. So I don't know if you can see here. I'm going to get up close to the camera. I'm just trying to get it so it goes through the felt pretty close to the edge, but not right up to. But I also need to snag that fabric. So this is where it gets tricky, and I'm trying to do this in the air on camera. So you can hold it. If you hold it with your finger, once you've gotten a few stitches down, it'll go a little bit quicker. It'll go a little bit easier because you are putting it in the direction. And I am just doing a little basting stitch and basting it down. Like I said, it's kind of snug together when you first start. So unfortunately this part is not the easiest. So there, I've snagged my fabric, and I'm just going down following my line, and we're just going to keep on continuing to go down. And we're just going to do this for a little ways. So I'm not going to be doing the whole thing all the way down to the bottom just yet. I'm just trying to get it spaced here so that I have a few stitches on this side done. Now I'm going to start on the other side. And again, like I said, once you've gotten this out, and if one of your pleats is close to the edge and you don't want to undo that pleat because it's going to look weird, you can sew through the pleat, which is 2 layers. And I'm just going to go back up through here to get this sewn down, just to get that as close to the edge as possible. Again, I want this as close to the edge as I possibly can get it without going over, because I'm going to be putting my line of seed beads right along that edge. And as you can see, I'm using the folded pleat here, so And as you can see, it's fiddly, so it's not always the easiest to tack this down when you're trying to go around curves and when you are trying to fold under. So I am going to just kind of hold that there, and I'm going to come back up through just because I want that as close to the edge as possible. There. And see, this is what I mean by it gets knotted up. Although they just slide right out once you find the spot that it's easily pulled, the knots are easily pulled apart. And there's my hard part that I was talking about, the very stiff. It's where I broke my needle trying to get the thread through the felt. That's why I'm taking a thicker needle here. And see, really? And now you don't have to use embroidery thread for this. I was just doing it because I have the colors, and the colors match. I have colors that'll match pretty much any color of fabric. Because I do machine embroidery for some things. And so now I'm going to start curving this now back toward once I get up there, back toward my inner curve. And again, you don't have to do big stitches. You don't have to do little stitches. We're just tacking this down because when we start sewing all the beads on, that's really going to tack it down. All right, so now I've gotten this side tacked down. I'm going to go finish working on this side. So I am going to come across. So as you can see on this one, I've got threads all over the place. And it's fine. I do that all the time just because I want to make sure this lays exactly the way I want it. This part is important. Doing the beads, doing the other stuff, you know, that's important too, but making sure your fabric is laying the way you want it on here, to me, I think is very important, because if you don't have it laying right, it's not going to look good in the end result. And so I'm just tacking down right along the edge. And like I said, don't worry about how big your stitches are, as long as, why is that? There we go. As long as, you know, they're pretty even and pretty level along the edge, so you're not going a stitch in here and a stitch here and a stitch, you know, you don't want it all over the place, but you don't want it, you don't have to be, I mean, you can be if you really want to, but and see, there's my very stiff spot. There we go. And so now I pulled the thread up and I didn't snag the fabric. I can just do this and snag the fabric. Now I may snag just to fold over some of those pleats at this point, just so that it's a little neater. And it's also probably going to be a little bit easier to clean up later. And that's fine, you can, because again, we're going to be cutting off a bunch of this at the bottom anyways. So the one thing you want to make sure of, though, even if you have bunches on the back, you want to make sure there are no bunches of thread on the front. So I've had thread knot up on the back of the felt, and that's fine. Like if you get a big knot back there, as long as it's a really secure knot, you're okay. So I'm just following my lines here. And we're almost down to the bottom. So I'm going to do a few more stitches on this side. And then I'm going to go back and switch over to the other side. Because I want to make sure that other side is good. And so all I'm doing here is trying to conform the fabric to my line. And I know the line is very faint on this spot here. It didn't transfer that great. All right, so now I'm going to switch back over to the other side. And as you can see, once you start getting it conformed, it does get a little bit easier once you're getting down to the end part. And that's a nice big bite. Like I said, you don't have to do small ones. Like that one was pretty big. I do some big ones, some little ones, just because depending on where I'm going on corners. And all right, now that we're close to the end, I am going to figure out where I need my tail fabric to be. And I am going to sew up through the spot that I need it to be at, which is going to be right about here. And again, I'm not going right directly to the edge. And I am going to then figure out where my fabric is going to be, and then I'm going to sew through the pleats all at once. And again, it doesn't have to be perfectly through every pleat, just so that you're holding it down into place. And then I am going to literally just tack it in to that spot. Like that. And then I'm going to come back up through And I am just going to sew over it once so I can see where my ending is. And I'm going to do it one more time just so I have a pretty good idea of where, and actually I'm coming up through my fabric, and that's fine. And I can go back down through the fabric because this is just tacking it here. And then now I'm just going to trim off. So all I'm doing is just cutting right up along that fabric or that thread that we just created. And it kind of curved a little bit there. And so we've got it tacked down nice and tight there. I am just going to now go through it a couple of times and just tack and make sure that stays down. Now this is gonna be fine because we're gonna be covering that with beads. And then all you have to do now, because this one was so close to the edge, I can literally just do one stitch here and finish off this side. And then there's only a couple stitches here that needs to be done to finish off this side and tack it down. So there's one. And I did a big, pretty long stitch there. And then this one right there. And so now you've got your shibori tacked down. And your ribbon is not going to be exact. So the way the pleats lay on this one isn't going to be 100%. So don't try to get it perfect. You will never get shibori perfect because of the way the pleats work. I am just going to tie this off in a knot. So I run through the felt and tie it off. And then I'm just going to run through the felt again. Just a little bit. It's just snagging the back side of the felt. Do that in a couple of spots. Because again, this is going to get glued to... it's going to get glued, so any knots won't be coming out. And see, like that knot knotted, but it knotted messy. I'm just going to run through the felt one more time and snip off my thread, and we're good to go. Now, to start on the beads. So what I did on this one was I got some Nymo D thread. It's a bluish color. Again, you're not going to be seeing the thread anyways, but I try to get it as close to the color as I can. And I'm going to be taking a good long length of it and threading on a beading needle here. And so if I can get it out of my... There we go. All right, I'm going to pause you while I thread this needle and I will be back. All right, so I've threaded my needle and I am going to start by making this curve here. I'm going to start on this side and doing the long beads. So I'm going to start right up close to my point, and I'm going to start by coming up through where I'm going to be covering, and I do this with all of my threads. On this one, I'm going to do something a little different because it doesn't like to knot, and I'm just going to put my thread back through the felt, and I'm going to tie a couple knots. That's all. Just tie one knot. And if you know how to make a surgeon's knot, wrapping it around twice, a nice surgeon's knot, I'm going to cut off my tail a little bit there. And so now I've got my thread tacked down. It's not going anywhere. I'm going to start up here, close to the top. And what we're going to do is we're going to run down along the side. And there's my spot there. There's my spot there. So I'm going to run down along the side here. So I'm going to do the outside border first. And all I'm going to do is pick up 2 seed beads. And I'm going to hold the felt. I'm going to make sure the seed beads are right up against the spot where I started. And I'm going to stick my needle straight down through on that blue line that I drew. And just pull my thread until, if I don't snag it like I just did. Oopsie. Throwing things. And you're going to make sure that they're tight. And then you're going to come back up through between the two. Right on that line. And it's hard for me to see while I've got it on camera here. There we go. And you're going to pull. And I have a lot of thread here, so that's why it's taken me a long time to pull. And I'm going to go back through that first or that second bead. And just pull that as tight as I can. And now I'm going to pick up 2 more seed beads. And I'm going to make this a little shorter by pulling my tail of my thread, just so I don't have so much to pull through. And you don't have to take this much thread at one point. I do, just because I don't like having to stop and start and thread. And you're going to go down through. And see, I keep snagging my loop for whatever reason. And so now you're going to have 4 beads on. Now, depending on how you want to do it, it's up to you. You can come only through this last bead, or you can come up through, and I saw this on somebody else's video and was trying it, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. Come up through that between the first and the second bead and go through 3 beads. That will give you a little more security on the seed beads, because you're passing through them multiple times instead of just once or twice. Pick up 2 more beads, go down and go through 3 beads. So now you're going to do this all the way till you get to your you're going to go through that all the way until you get to your line. So I'm going to go till I get to the line, so you don't have to watch me do this. And I will show you the next step in a few seconds. I will be right back. All right, guys. So I've gotten up to the point where I'm supposed to be. I'm 1 seed bead over where I think I was supposed to be on my line, but that's fine. Again, it's not going to be 100% even, just because these seed beads are a different shape. I could probably take one off, but in reality, I'm probably right where I need to be. So now the next step is going to be to add this little section of focal. And so I'm coming out of my seed bead. I'm going to pick up, normally you only pick up 2, but to start out, we're going to pick up 3 because you don't want to be coming out of a big bead. It's a lot easier if you come out the smaller bead. So I'm going to pick up a little 2mm, a 4mm bicone that is in the same color as these crystals, from my stash, and then another one of these Amazonite 2mm, And again, I'm just going to hold it tight. Now make sure on these that you are going over your fabric. You're not on the outside. We're trying to cover this stitching. So as you can see here, I'm just holding the beads over the spot that I want, and I'm just going to stick my needle down through right next to that amazonite, and I'm just going to pull it tight. And then I'm going to come back up through and see, this is my stiff spot. I don't want to come back up through there. I want to come back up through there. I'm going to go through, especially because the bicones tend to be sharp, I want to go through those as many times as I can. And I'm just going to go through the bicone, through the amazonite, pull my thread tight. And now don't worry if this doesn't so you see how neat these are? Don't worry that this isn't that neat. We are going to neaten that up here after we're done putting all the beads on. Now I'm going to pick up a white bicone. And I've been looking for the darkest amazonite for this, just because I want the darkest ones on here instead of the whiter ones, especially to accent the color. And again, I'm just going to hold it in place and push my needle through. And I think that's how I broke the needle before, pushing the needle through because of the way I hold my needle to push. And we're going to come back up through, making sure I'm in the right spot, covering my stitches with beads, going through the two, and I know my fingers are in the way here of me and pulling it tight. And I'm going to move the camera for you guys just a little bit, just so you can see what I'm working on. Sorry, guys. Just because I know I tend to work off camera. All right, so now I've gotten those on. I'm going to pick up my last bicone and my last dark amazonite for this section. And that's going to almost get me to where I need to be right there. I probably could have put another seed bead back here, but that's fine. Again, if it's off by one seed bead, it's not going to really make a difference because you're not going to notice it. Now, if it was off by 4 or 5 seed beads, you know, like this part was down here, you definitely notice that. So now I'm going to go back up through. And then continue on with the seed beads. That is if I can get my needle through. And I'm going to continue on with my seed beads going around. And I will catch up with you when we get ready to do the next section. And then I will show you how we continue on and cover each end, because we'll cover the ends and we'll put our beads in the middle. So I'm going to go around and I will be back. All right, guys. So I figured I'd show you how to go around the corner. So I'm going to pick up 2 seed beads because we're going around our sharpest point now. And so this is where it's going to get a little tricky because, again, you've got to get it so it goes around the curve. So I'm going to put 2 seed beads on and stick my needle down through if I can here. Like I said, I over stiffened this felt, so, and I'm going to come back up through just through the one, if I can get my needle back through. There we go. And without knotting everything. Ooh. Twisty knot. And I'm going to go back through just that one bead. I'm going to pick up, I'm going to try 2 beads. 2 beads may not work. We'll just take this little one. I had slid that off because it was a little thinner. Thinner ones tend to work better in corners. And I'm going to come here and see 2 beads might not work. We're going to give it a shot. I'm going to come back down through the felt. If I don't wrap around. Now, in order to avoid that, you could round your corners on your felt. I don't. I'm going to go back up through just between those last 2 beads. I'm going to go through that one because that's my point. That's technically my point bead. And then I'm going to take 2 more beads now that I've rounded the curve. And now I'm going to start going back up toward my other side. And so now this is where it gets tricky, because what you need to do, as you can see, that is a kind of a straight line, which is okay, but, and we will fix that, I'm going to go between the 1 and the 2 a little closer to this side so that when I pick up that bead, I can now start curving it back toward that, because I don't want it straight. What I don't want is it to be straight up like this. Now I can start curving back toward the other side. So, in doing that, now as you can see, I'm starting to pull it slightly this way, and I just stabbed myself with the needle. And push it down through. That was a pretty big stab, too. Surprised I'm not bleeding. All right, and then I'm going to go back up through 3 beads if I can get my needle through, and continue on, because now I want to secure this so that I'm ready to start curving inwards without snagging my shibori. And now I can start going up my thread path. And when I say thread path, I'm talking about where I sewed on the shibori ribbon. So now I'm going to be starting to come over the ribbon and continue on up. And it's okay if the ribbon is slightly showing, because again, we're going to be doing edging, and that's going to get covered with the edging beads. So this is a border, and then we're going to be doing edging too. So now I'm going to come back up through between those last 3 beads and go up through 3, just because I want these a little more secure. And we're going to be reinforcing these anyways, just because I want them perfect. But anyways, I'm going to go and finish up to my stopping point, and then we will put on this section here. I will be right back. All right, guys, I'm back. So I'm close to where I think I need to be. So to test to see if I only have 3 from the top, when I get done, this is how I do it. So I'm going to take my beads and I'm going to string them all on the thread all at once. So I'm going to do the ammonite, the orange bicone, another ammonite, and again, it doesn't really matter what ones at this point because these are not staying on there. And I'm just doing my alternating pattern. And I am trying to pick up as many of the dark ones as I can, just so I don't have to dig them out later. And I'm just going to pull this down on the thread and see where this lands. Now, if this is going to land somewhere where, like, it's going to land where I marked, however, that is definitely more than 3 seed beads from the top up here. So I know I need to go another few more seed beads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle back through all of these beads, just because this is the easiest way to get them off. And I'm just going to slide them off my thread and just set them down there. Now I can add a few more seed beads and try again. So I'm going to continue on. I'm going to do, I think, 4 more and see if that's enough. It may be too many. So what you could do is you could do 2 and then try it. I think 4 will be perfect. Just guessing on the size of the beads. Come on. There we go. So I'm coming up between the between 3 and 4 beads from where I've just sewn down, just because I'm trying to reinforce these. We are going to reinforce them at the end, just one more time, but we'll be doing that at the end. So that's 2. I'm going to do 2 more. 1, 2. And again, you could test this by adding all your beads on and seeing. I think that should be good. So again, we'll test. We'll do our test. So now, if it's off by a single bead, it's not a big deal. If it's off by several seed beads, that is a big deal, just because that's going to cause your pattern to definitely look off, especially on the stop and start at the top and bottom. Now, if I was just going around with bicone, ammonite, bicone, ammonite, bicone, ammonite, yeah, see, 2 would be perfect. So 2 more would be perfect. So I'm going to take these beads off. Now I could couch these, like I could just sew this down and then couch them, but I don't like couching, especially when I'm doing long runs of beads. I think it leaves it too bumpy. And it's not as secure because now you've only got one thread going through your beads, instead of several passes. And you'll notice if you're doing it right, you have a nice, beautiful running stitch. Not that you can see it here because I had smaller stitches, but you'll have a nice, beautiful running stitch along your thread path. So when you're cutting, you'll see where your thread is. So Now that I'm coming out the last 3, I'm going to pick up, remember, we're picking up our big beads now. So I'm going to do an Amazonite, a orange bicone, or a amber bicone, because I think those are amber, and another Amazonite. And we're going to do 3 because we always want to end on a smaller bead. And now I'm going to stick that down. And again, it's not really curving, but we're going to get it to curve here in a second. So I'm going to stick that down right where it needs to be. And now the trick on getting these bigger beads to curve, once I get knots undone, is to stick your thread through where, so I know I need this to curve out. So I'm going to stick my thread right there through, and I'm only going to do 2, and I'm going to go through these 2, and it's going to start to curve it. See, it's starting to curve it. Now I'm going to pick up my bicone and another Amazonite. And again, now we're pulling it in toward our curve. So I'm going to curve it and stick my needle down through where I need it to be. And then come back up through right on the edge of that curve and go back through those 2, which is also going to help secure those beads, but it's also going to help it start to form the curve. Now I'm going to pick up my last bicone, my last Amazonite, and I want a darker one, so I'm going to find the bluest one I can find, one of the bluest ones. And now we're going to curve back toward and see, now we've got a really nice curve. And I'm going to go actually back up through the 2 here. And again, we are going to tighten this up here in a bit when we go back through at the end, because I did on this one go through that outer layer several times just to tighten it up, and I will show you what I mean at the end here. And that looks weird. Why does that look weird? Because it wrapped around. That's why. It wrapped around my thread. There we go. And now I'm going to pick up my last few seed beads. And I am going to seat these. And then show you how to join. So we have a spot right there for 1 seed bead, maybe 2. And again, if it's 1 or 2 seed beads, that's fine. I'm going to come up through right near that last bead. instead of going through multiples for this one, because again, this one's going to be curving. And so now I'm going to pick up one seed bead. I'm going to slide it down and see if that's going to fill my gap. If not, I will pick up a second one. That's not going to fill my gap. First of all, that's not a good seed bead. That is a very thin seed bead, so I'm going to take that off, and I just unthreaded my needle. So I'm going to pause you. I'm going to rethread my needle, and I will be right back. All right, so I'm going to look for a nice, thick, wide seed bead, that's a pretty decent size. Again, you want to make sure that, you know, if you're using a thin bead, that's fine too, but why is this not wanting to go down? Oh, because it was snagged. And see, that's going to need a second one. So I'm going to put a second bead on there, and that's fine. So again, trying to do this on camera so you can see it. I'm just going to go down right where I started on that other seed bead. And then this is where we are going to reinforce just a little bit when we come back up through to tack this down. So I'm going to come up trying to get it between some of those beads, and I'm going to run my thread through those two beads. So this one before the two that I added, the one that I added, now I'm going to go through the last one that I added, and several of the other ones, just to attach those in. And right now it's not going to sit perfect because we're not done yet. So now I am up here at the top, and I am coming through my beads. I'm going to go put my thread back through because we are going to do this zigzag, this cross part here. So what that is it's an ammonite. It's a nice dark ammonite. So it's one seed bead, one ammonite, and it would help if my thread was not going in the wrong direction. So I'm going to come up right up at the top, as close as I can to the top in my on one side, and I'm going to thread on seed bead, ammonite, amazonite. I'm going to forever call it ammonite. It's amazonite, and one seed bead. And now this is going to come up and be just up here at the top. So I'm going to stick that down. Now you don't have to reinforce this. You just need to tack it down. The next thing I'm going to do is come up down just a hair. Little bit of a space. And that one is going to be a seed bead and ammonite, a seed bead and ammonite. And I know what you're thinking. There's a line of seed beads in between those. But this is what I'm doing in order to get, and I'm going to set that seed bead there. So ammonite, seed bead, ammonite. And honestly, it doesn't really matter if you get the darker ones on this. And seed bead. Oops. Get back here. As I stab myself again. And then we are going to take this across to the other side. And then now there's a gap there. There's a very small gap. And that's where we're going to stick. And if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seed beads. That's 4, 5, 6. And it would help if I brought my needle through first. So I'm going to bring my needle up. I'm going to set those seed beads there. I'm going to bring my needle up now between the 2 rows we just did and add those 6 seed beads. Five and 6, right? 6. All right. And I'm going to slide this down. And I am going to, again, push that as close as I can and push it down in between. Again, I'm just testing to make sure when I'm pushing like that, I'm just testing to make sure that it is in there. So now we've got that. And yes, we still have our second row to do. But now we're going to do the second row, which is going to be a seed bead. So the next one is, and I'm going to turn this around this way, I'm coming up between that last seed bead and this Amazonite, and I'm pulling my thread up through. And I'm going to add a seed bead, an Amazonite, a orange bicone, another Amazonite, and another seed bead. There's a seed bead there. And then I'm going to take this slide it down my thread, and again, holding it tight in place, I'm going to go back through my fabric and pull tight. Now you can, if you need to, couch this by coming up through in between in a spot and just tacking it down in the exact same spot. And so now you're saying, but wait a minute, there's another set of stuff. So again, you're going to add that set of stuff. I'm going to come back up through. And my thread is getting a little tender because I've been going through this very stiff felt. Oops. And I'm going to go back through my beads. And I'm going to pick up an orange bicone, an Amazonite, and a seed bead. And we're going to go back down through following our curves. So again, as close as you can get it. And so I'm tucking my seed beads and again, I'm going to couch this one just so it is right up against the edge there. And so it's nice and tight. And so there is your, this part here. And so we've done that. So now I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to go over to the bottom. So now this is where this one gets a little tricky because this, I did a, Amazonite, a crystal, and an Amazonite. And I leaned it toward, just slightly toward the edge there, and pushed that in. Now, when I say this gets tricky, it's because we need to reinforce this, but we also need to make sure that the thread isn't going to show in this, just because that is a very very heavy bead, and so you don't want it to, and again, you want to make sure it's as tight as it possibly can be, and you're going to go back up through, and as you can see, I've pulled it tight enough that I was able to stab that bead going through the fabric. All right, so now that we've got that in, the next thing is going to be putting 3 beads on this side. So I'm going to come up on the bottom here. And I'm going to grab 3 seed beads. There's 2, 3. And I'm going to make sure they tuck right down in next to that Amazonite, and I'm going to stick my needle through. So there's my 3 there, and I'm going to do that again. On the other side, because I have 6 beads there. Oops, would help if I stab my needle back through. That's what I get for talking and not paying attention. Oh. Why is that snagged like that? Interesting. We're going to fix that. I see what happened. It wrapped around. So when I was tightening it up, the thread wrapped around that big bead. There we go. All right, so now we're going to stick our thread back in now that I've fixed our... And if you get these little knots like this in there, they have the little loop. If you pull up on that little loop, usually it'll come undone. They're not true knots. They're just twists that... And again, you could do less thread. You could do... All right, so now I'm going to tuck this down in and make sure that it is tucked in right there next to and I want to couch this this crystal just because it needs to be over toward this side more, so I'm going to couch it so it's purposefully this direction. Try not to stab your thread like that. There we go. Now we've got a seed bead, an amazonite, and a seed bead. That is, if I can snag one of these holes with this beading needle. All right. Not going to fight with it. And did I do that again? I did it again. I forgot to go back up through the fabric. There's 2 off. There's the last one off. All right, so going back up through the fabric. Again, I'm snagging it right where I need it to start. And yes, my thread is getting frayed a little bit just because, but we're getting down to the wire. We're getting down to the last little bit of beading, so we're almost done with it. And then we'll be moving on to the next step, which will be to put on the backing and then do the border. And so now I am just going to take this, ow, without stabbing myself, and tuck it down through. If I don't tie my beads in a knot, how did that get in there? All right, I got to get this knot out. I'm going to pause you. Okay, so I've tacked that down. So now, if you notice, we are good to go on this side here. The fabric is kind of sticking through a little bit between those beads here, which is fine. You don't see it as much on this one, but that's fine. So now I've gotten all of this. Now the next thing is to do this row here. So this one starts with a amazonite right down in between this bicone and this amazonite. So I'm going to stick my needle up through where I'm going to start, and I'm going to pick up the amazonite and just run it up along that edge. So there's my amazonite and a seed bead. And you want to make sure that it's tucked down where you want it. And we are going to then pick up, I'm going to go back up through both of those beads and pick up 2 more beads. And then just run up the side. If I can stop knotting up my thread. So this is the only thing with doing a long span of thread, is your thread will start to fray after a while and get kind of touchy is a good word, I guess. And I'm going to go up through all 3 of those. And I want to get to the point in this video, and we are getting kind of long, but the rest of it isn't going to be too is not going to take too long once we get this part done. The beading of it and doing this part tends to be the longest part. Doing the border and finishing up with the backing, that tends to go pretty quick, especially if you know the brick stitch. Go through 3. All right, so I'm going to continue on. I'm going to get to the end, and I will show you how we reinforce when I'm done. I'll be right back. Okay, guys, so I finished up my second row, and lastly, we just need to figure out where exactly we are going to stick our... So he is going to start roughly right in line with this bicone. So, and so what I'm doing is I'm just sticking my needle through, trying to find the right spot where I want to start my diagonal line going up. And I'm going to pick up my bicone, my Amazonite 8mm, and my bicone. And I'm going to, and that is coming up, and it is going to stop roughly right here next to that last seed bead right there. And I'm going to try not to twist this up too much and just pull it tight. Now I'm going to reinforce at least once here. And so I looked on the back to see exactly where I put my thread through. So if you want to make sure you get it directly reinforced, see where your thread is and put your needle right back through the same hole or close to. All right, so that is now attached fairly good. And so now we're mirroring. So to straighten up these lines and make them a little neater like this one is, I'm going to stick my thread up through, starting somewhere. It doesn't really matter where, you pick your spot. And you're going to take your thread and you're going to run through all of those edge beads. So I started there. That is where my thread is coming out. And I'm just going to run through as many beads as I can get at one time and just run through everything. Oops. Trying not to snag. What on earth? Ah, twist. So I have a twist right there in my yarn, or my thread. There we go. And trying not to snag the other one at the same time. We're going to set this guy aside now. We don't need him as a template at the moment, so we'll just set him out of the way. And so you may have to do this more than once. That's why I do the extra long thread. This is also going to reinforce your, come on. There we go. It's going to reinforce your bicones, which are sharp. It'll also pull your seed beads nice and tight. What is... Something stuck. And just so I don't break my needle again. And if you've gone through these several times, it may get stiff like that. Just because seed beads aren't, especially 11-ohs, they don't have the biggest holes. Why? There we go. What is happening here? So it just got twisted up a little bit when I was undoing the knot. All right, so as you can see, it's starting to curve it a little nicer, a little more rounder. Again, as you start pulling it tighter, it will start neatening it up. You want to be careful around your curve that you don't pull too tight, because otherwise that'll make it go straight. And then just keep going up and following your lines. Try not to get it snagged on your big beads. And we're going to go back through all of these sharper beads. And I'm just giving it a nice tug and pulling it tight. And then I'm going to go through these last few beads up here. And if you notice, this upper part here, which is kind of annoying me, looks kind of square. What you can do at this point is, once you've gone through all your beads, and I'm going to go through a few more, back down toward the way I was, you can stick your needle back through the fabric, come up through where you want that curve to be, and just give it a little bit of a couch. To make it a little more pointy. Still not perfect, but it's better than it was. All right, so now, as you can see, that neatened up my edges a lot. So now we can just finish off. And by finishing off, I'm just going to take this and kind of go through the fabric a little bit, making sure I'm not snagging anything that can be seen on the front. You can tie a knot around some threads, or even around some of the felt. So I snagged the felt there. I'm just going to tie a knot. And then I'm going to go back through some more felt. Just a small layer of it. And then I don't have to do anything because this is going to get glued. So we can now cut off our thread. And one of the things that you'll notice is I haven't cut the thread on this one, even though I tied it off and did everything. And that's because in the event that this one didn't go according to the plan, and let's say when I was looking at it, I noticed a thread over here or a thread somewhere where I didn't like the way it looked with just this pattern, I can then go back in and add more beads to the first one, and then that way it's not going to be so, you can make them symmetrical and you have the same beads everywhere. So now that we're done with that, the next step, which is the tricky step, is going to be cutting your felt as close as you can get it without cutting threads. So I'm going to start with the one we just finished. And what I start doing is I start going close to the edges, a little bit like that. And again, you don't want to cut your ribbon, you don't want to cut your beads off, but what you want to make sure of is that you're as close as possible to the edge. So I like to hold it so I can see just where I'm going and make sure that I'm not, you can be right up to the edge of those threads, but you don't want to cut the threads. And now it's going to be hard to get in the curves, which is why I had my curved scissors out earlier and I dropped them. If you need to get in a curve, curved scissors are great because I can use just the nipping ends to get in my curve here. And again, I'm just shaving, so I've got a thread right there, but that's okay because that is the green thread, which was holding the shibori down. But as long as I don't cut my blue threads, I'm okay. Because again, I don't need to keep the shibori down anymore. So I've got a thread right there, so I can't cut that close to that area. So we will just trim like that. And again, I'm just trying to get as close as I possibly can to my edges and make them so that they're really not seen very well. We are going to do something with the felt here to make it a little more invisible. And I will show you that trick here in a minute. And we're going to do this one, which is a little bit more messy because this was the one I did first, but okay, good. And as you can see, I've got a thread there that is sticking kind of over. I can just pull that thread like this because again, when I put the glue on and we glue everything down, it won't be in the way. Because we're going to tack it, we'll tack it down. Perfect. And again, now I'm just trimming where, and this is the mess. This is kind of the messy part of shibori, is getting this felt trimmed right up to the edge of those beads without trimming your threads and without having too much of it showing. All right, so we're good there. And yes, I've got strings everywhere. So we're pretty good there. That string's going to annoy me, but that's fine. It'll get covered when we do the I'm just going to cut that there. All right, so now that I've gotten them cut pretty close and they're pretty smooth, you don't want to have any sharp points. You want to have it kind of nice and smooth. If you see anything that doesn't look perfect, you can continue to trim. And so now what I'm going to do, now that I've gotten both of these done, I'm going to set my beading tray aside, first of all. And then we are going to grab some felt, or some E6000, and I'm going to grab a piece of backing. I will be right back. Okay, so I use Ultra Suede on mine, and so I have greens and blues here, and I'm going to look at what matches the look of my piece, what I think will look good on the back. So I've got different dark colors. It's definitely not going to be that one. That one's too yellow. This one is too light. This one is too dark. It's a toss-up between this one, which is more oceany, and this one, which is more green. Now, again, this one's going to make the green, you're not going to really see it. And again, it just depends on what you want to use for a color, for your backing. This one's going to make the lighter colors pop. This one's going to make it so that it kind of fades in and it's the same color. And again, you have to just figure out which one you're going to use. I think I'm going to use this green one, even though I've got blue thread here, because I think, again, I think that's going to be more of the value that we're going for. And so the other little trick that I'm going to show you is you've got white felt. I've got a green Sharpie. So I have Sharpies in every color. And this one's kind of dark, so I have a lime green Sharpie. And we're just going to cover just the edge in that color green so that when you're looking at the side, you're not going to notice. It's going to blend in a lot more. And now you don't have to use a Sharpie. You can use a marker. You can use acrylic paint. And you don't have to wait till the end. You could actually do your paint on the felt. Again, it's going to hinder your pattern a little bit, but you could do it beforehand. I like to do it after because then I can see what I really need to get and what I don't. And I can do my edges here so that the edges are green. And then in here, I'm just going to kind of hide my blue lines. Trying to avoid my seed beads. And so it just kind of allows it to fade into the background. All right, better. Again, I just don't want a lot of felt showing. And again, you don't have to do this step. You could skip this. I just do it just because I think it gives it a more polished look when you've got the beads wrapped around and you can't see white felt. All right, so next step. Oh, I'm gonna sneeze. Excuse me. Sorry about that, guys. Had to sneeze. So the next step is basically we're going to take E6000 and lots of it, and I'm just going to basically gunk up the back, and I'm almost out of this tube. And then we're going to stick it down to our fabric. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. Try to leave a little bit of space at the edge. Just a tiny little bit, just so that you're not having to bead through the glue, because that will break your needle. And I am going to cut this thread because it's annoying me, but it's getting glued down, so it's definitely not going to go anywhere. And I'm making sure those threads are specifically getting glued down. That is if I have enough glue left. Oop, there we go. Perfect. That about does it for this little tube of E6000. I like using these little tubes, mostly because they don't get dried out before I use them all. All right, so now that is pretty well gunked up. And I'm just going to stick this one down, making sure all of my threads are tucked in nicely against. And I'm going to stick that down, press it, and we are going to pause now for several hours because this needs to set up. So when you're doing this, I know a lot of people have done videos where I've seen them glue stuff down and then immediately be like, okay, I glued it down, now let's cut it and start. You're gonna slide the glue across your felt, and it's going to smear, and then it's not gonna look good. So you want to just make sure it's pressed down very nicely in all the spaces like that. And we're just going to let it sit, and we're going to forget about it for an hour or two. And then when we come back, or when I come back, it'll be a few seconds for you. It will, we'll get this finished, and then I'll show you what it looks like as a pair of earrings. So anyways, I'll be back. All right, guys. So for you, it's only been a few seconds. For me, it's been, well, overnight. I let these set up overnight. So now we're just going to start cutting around, and I'm just going to cut off the excess here, because this I can use for, you know, another smaller pair of earrings. And then I'm just going to cut up in between. Making sure that I have felt right up along, or suede right up along. And then I am going to start cutting around in around the shape, just to get this right up close to it. And remember, I left a little bit of a gap for the glue, because when we start sewing the beads on, you really don't want to be sewing through E6000 with your needle. You will break needles. And so I'm just going to get it as close as I can to the edge, and then we will continue to do the beading. And that's one of the things that I love about having curved scissors like this. It does help you to go around corners. So anyways, I'm going to get these trimmed up, and I will come back and we will start doing the finishing. I will be right back. All right, guys, so I finished cutting them up, and as you can see, I had a lot of little snips. Little trick on getting all of those up off of your mat. If you're using fabric like I am, I just take a piece of packing tape. You could use masking tape or anything, and I'm just picking up all of my lint pieces, just so I have a clean surface to work on. All right, so with that being said, I have quite a bit of thread left from that last, the last earring that I did. So I'm going to use that to start out with. So what we're going to need to do is make a knot. And so, I'm literally just wrapping around my finger a couple of times, making a squishy knot. It's, you know, doesn't have to be super big. And like that one has a loop. I'm just going to trim close to the knot, because again, this is going to get buried inside. And find a good spot where you have good enough space. It doesn't really matter where you start. And you're going to put that needle in and go on the diagonal. So I'm kind of going this way through the fabric, just because I don't want that knot to be right up close to the edge. So I'm going to do this, come through my fabric, in between the backing fabric and the felt, and then I'm just going to tuck that knot inside. So to do the break stitch, you're going to start out by picking up 1, 2. It'd be easier if I had it on a tray or in a bigger bowl, but that's fine. You're going to pick up 2, and you're going to figure out just about, so I'm going to hold on to the thread here and figure out just about where I want to poke through both my felt and you want to be close to the edge, but not so close that you're going to, so take a little bite. You want little bites. Try to keep them uniform. And you're going to pull that tight, and then you're going to go through just that second bead that you put on there. And so that's going to start your brick stitch. And then you're going to pick up one more. So now it's going to be ones going around. And we're going to do the same thing. And I know these earrings are really weird shapes, so it's going to be hard to figure out. And you're going to want to go just about where, little less than the bead, because you want to be going up through the center of the bead. And so you're going to continue on and just do this. And again, because I'm using this blue, it's going to be very faint on the back, so it's not going to show up real strongly against the green. I think it probably would have shown more against that turquoisey color that I was thinking about using, that I changed to. So I'm just looking and seeing about where I think I need to go. Ow. And stabbing myself. And going through both the felt and the suede, and I'm just going to continue going on around. So I'm going to continue on this one and continue going around, and I will show you what that looks like, and we'll finish up and put the earrings on here in a minute. I will be right back. All right, guys, so I'm up to the last couple of beads. I'm going to put one more on and then see if we are ready to put our last bead on. And just so you can see, I did break a needle. So I got the glue up to the edges in a spot and going through the felt. And that's why I'm pushing it on the table. Going through the felt and the glue, the needle snapped. So you will be careful. If you glue too close to the edge, you will break glue. Now, that could probably get one bead. It may be a little tight, but I'm gonna give it a shot. Yeah, that's fine. So now I'm putting on my last seed bead on the brick stitch. And so now we're coming out of this last bead. We are going to go down through this. Whoops. And my thread is starting to fray. We're going to go down through that seed bead, and then we're going to poke. We're going to pull it through the back, and then we're going to go back up through this one and back down through that last one. And then we are going to poke through the felt. If you can get just the felt. If you can't, then that's fine too. But just to kind of secure it. And now you have it finished off. One of the things I like to do is go back up through a couple of times. And then now we need to put our beads on the top to figure out where we want where we want the earring to hang. So I'm going to come up through, and I'm going to literally go through the fabric if I can here. Just a little bit. So I'm just going to go through the fabric until I'm coming close to coming out of a seed bead. And right there, as you can see, my needle snagged the seed bead. So what I'm doing is I'm just going through some seed beads now. Now this is going to help secure. And I'm just going to run up this line of beads. And again, running up through the beads, it's going to help give you some security on those lines. And this can be kind of a pain trying to get your needle in You may not be able to get more than, I was trying to get more than 3 at a time. There we go. And on the bigger beads, you may not, because of the curves, you may not be able to get more than a couple at a time, which is fine. All right, so now I'm back up to where my top is. I am going to go through the fabric and figure out exactly where I want this to hang. And so I think I'm going to come out this bead right here, which is one of my higher beads. Actually, no, I'm going to come out this bead next to it. So I'm just going to go through that bead, and I'm going to hold it just to see how it hangs. And I like how it hangs, so I'm going to pick up 2, 4, 5, 6 seed beads. And I'm going to go back through I'm going to use the bead right next to it and just make a little loop. And again, I'm just going to do this several times so I have a nice bit of thread. And if you want to go through the back because it's easier to see, like I'm doing here, that's fine too. It doesn't have to be on the front. Try not to snag your yarn or your thread. I'm sorry if I'm off camera, guys. So I'm just going back through. We'll move this down a little bit. All right, so I've gotten that secured a couple of times. I'm going to do one more, I think. Just going on up through. Trying not to snag my thread on my earring. And then I'm going to come back down through just those 3, not the last one. Actually, no, I'm going to go through the brick stitch as well because I'm going to fasten off. So I'm going to go through the brick stitch if I can get my needle back through. There's a lot, actually no, because there's a lot of there is a lot of thread in that. I don't think it's going to go through. So at this point, we need to fasten off. I just need to get through a bead. So this bead right here, and I don't know if you can see it real well, there's an awful lot of thread going through that. So I am just going to come through the fabric here. So nobody's really going to see. Actually, I just went through that thread bridge, and I'm just going to come back in through the fabric if I can. There is a lot of glue in this spot, so there we go. I'm through the fabric, and I'm going to figure out where my needle's coming out close to, and I'm going to make a knot between, just a simple 1 loop knot, and then run through some beads, and then do that again, and then cut off, and we're finished. I will show you how to put the ear wire on here in a second. So I'm just getting the thread making a knot, and now I've done 2 knots. I'm gonna run through some beads, come out, and snip that thread off, and drop my earring. Now, if you have a thread burner, which I do, I just don't like using it, especially on fabric, because I don't want to burn the fabric. You could thread burn that, but to be honest, nobody's gonna see any ends there. So to finish off, and yes, I was using my 400 power glasses. We're gonna put ear posts on with drops, and so I'm just deciding what I want for. I think the silver is gonna look good, so we're gonna use silver. So I have these metal ball posts that we're gonna use, and I'm gonna grab 2 small jump rings. Oh, that's not the same size, and they're kind of big. All right. So I've got 2 small jump rings. I haven't finished this one yet. I will finish this one off camera. But I just wanted to give you a good idea of shibori. And so we're just going to hook onto the ball. And then we're also going to hook on our earring through our loop that we created and close that up. And then just make sure that it's not going to snag. Now, there's a lot of fabric there. You could use a, excuse me, you could use a wire guardian. You could use, any number of things. But, and if you wanted to, you could use a stud and put a stud. So I think the next pair of earrings that we do, shibori, I will show you how to put a stud behind it. But anyways, I'll give you a nice close-up. So as you can see, any green felt that's showing through, that's why I colored it green. So, yeah, and I'll be playing with this for a little bit because it was a little tight there going around the curve. But as you can see, your thread doesn't really show on the back, and you're taking really small bites, super, super tiny bites out of the thread, out of the back. So it doesn't really show. But anyways, that's a shibori earring made with the Seafoam Sunrise collection from the Bargain Bee Box, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm going to go finish this one up off camera, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.